Hello friends and adventurers, today we'll be delving into the biggest Gothic mod released in 2018, namely The Legend of Ahssun. Legend of Ahssun was developed by a huge team. I really mean it. Besides the developers and testers, we have dozens of voice actors, animators, 3D artists, spacers, and musical arrangement. It's considered by the Gothic community to be the second best mod ever made for the Gothic series, next to Archelaus. It has full German voice acting, but also localization and subtitles in various languages. As you probably guessed it, we'll be covering the English version with German voice acting. Even the name itself is an ironic nudge to the fact that it got released in the first place. If you go on the Gothic forums, aka worldofgothic.com, you'll see posts dating back to 2012 about the legend of a mod the size of Gothic 2, a mod the size of a game. The developers themselves said, and I quote, "There were legends of a mod in the works, and they didn't lie. The mod came to life, and did its legend live up to its name? We tried to find out today." Alright, so we got a lot of ground to cover, so let's waste no time and jump into the introduction cinematic.
Die letzten Berichte meiner Agenten sprechen von einem erhöhten Aufkommen an Kriegsschiffen aus Viranon. Entweder haben sie dasselbe Problem oder versuchen aus unserem einen Vorteil zu ziehen.
Ich weiß zwar nicht, was sich in den Gewässern des Archipels oder auf Ahssûn abspielt, jedoch halte ich eine militärische Auseinandersetzung nicht mehr für ausgeschlossen.
Wie viel Zeit braucht es, um unsere Flotte für diesen Fall zu mobilisieren?
An eurer Stelle würde ich nicht zu früh aufs Ganze gehen.
Nun, womöglich präsentiert sich uns gerade eine weitere Option.
Eure königliche Hoheit, ihr habt mich rufen lassen?
Wohl wahr. Ich gehe davon aus, dass die Probleme mit Ahssûn bereits auf deine Ohren gestoßen sind.
Ihr vermisst Güterlieferungen und Nachrichten von der Insel und unser verehrter Admiral hier einige Schiffe aus den Gewässern.
Mehr als nur das. Seit einem Monat haben wir keinen Kontakt mehr zu unserer wichtigsten Kolonie des Archipels. Ich will, dass du mit einem Schiff als mein Gesandter persönlich die Überfahrt antrittst und offiziell die Beraterfunktion für den Fürsten Albrecht wahrnimmst. Er soll nicht vergessen, wem er verpflichtet ist.
Ich stimme zu. Dass Lalvanien die Herrschaft über diese Insel entgleitet, können wir uns nicht leisten. Es wäre mir eine Ehre, zur Sicherung des Reiches beitragen zu können.
Dir werden alle notwendigen Vollmachten gewährt, die es dir gestatten, sämtliche Ressourcen zu requirieren, um deinen Auftrag auszuführen. Admiral Kronstedt wird dir ein angemessenes Schiff für die Überfahrt zur Verfügung stellen. Nähere Details besprichst du mit Gaimar.
Ich danke euch. Sofern ihr keine Einwände habt, werde ich mich entfernen.
Habe ich nicht.
Gaimar war der Kopf unseres Geheimdienstes. Ich weiß nicht mal, ob das sein wirklicher Name war, aber er hat mich auf das Wichtigste bei dieser Mission vorbereitet. Zumindest dachte ich das damals. Selbst die Besatzung des Schiffes wurde von ihm ausgewählt und überwacht. Die Doncella war eine stolze Fregatte, über die mir Admiral Kronstedt das Kommando übertrug und mich nach Ahssûn bringen sollte. Rückblickend fragte ich mich, ob ich mir zu viel versprach, mir selbst eine Bedeutung zuteilte, derer ich nicht erhaben war, oder es nur ein Fingerzeig des Schicksals war. Nach nicht einmal einer Woche zog ein Sturm am Horizont herauf. Ein dunkles Omen, ein Zeichen der Zerstörung, dem man nicht entkommt. Wir zumindest entkamen nicht, und die Doncella war den Launen der Natur hilflos ausgeliefert. Die Gelehrten und Magier predigen, die Götter seien verbannt. Und dennoch, in unseren dunkelsten Stunden, erflehen wir alles von jedem. Das Schiff wurde schwer beschädigt. Mehrere Männer versanken in den Fluten. Kurz vor der Küste Ahssuns wurden wir schließlich versenkt. Einer von ihnen muss die Gunst der Stunde genutzt haben, um sich all meine Habe anzueignen, die einen Diplomaten von Rang ausweisen. Aber es war noch nicht das Ende. Es war noch nicht mein Ende. Mein Körper gehorchte mir schon längst nicht mehr. Und wenn doch, so hätte es vermutlich nichts geändert. So erfuhr ich erst im Nachhinein, dass Banditen mich und ein paar Matrosen aufgelesen und mitgenommen haben. Mich haben sie nicht getötet, aber an die Arena der Stadt Ahssûn verkauft. Dort im Kerker wartete ich schließlich auf mein unabwendbares Schicksal. Ich wurde nie im Kämpfen unterwiesen. Es war bis zu jenem denkwürdigen Tag auch nie erforderlich. Nun gaben sie mir ein Schwert, mit dem ich mein Leben verteidigen sollte. Ein altes Schwert mit einer schartigen Klinge. Sie hätten mich töten können. Aus irgendeinem Grund haben sie es nicht getan. Ich weiß bis heute nicht wirklich warum. Stattdessen haben sie mich aus der Stadt und in die Gosse geworfen. Das Zeitgefühl hatte ich inzwischen verloren. Aber vor ein paar Tagen war ich noch lalvanischer Abgesandter des Königs. Und dann hatte ich schließlich nichts mehr, bis auf ein paar Stofffetzen am Leib.
So right off the bat, we have some Game of Thronesy political intrigue tone set for the story. Seems the colonial empire of Lalvania lost contact with the most important colony, and we are sent in to investigate. Through tragic circumstance and a comedy of errors, our main character gets his clothes and documents stolen, and no one believes him. He is the representative of the king. I have thought about this plot premise for a while now, and it does seem believable, even if a bit stretched. Let me put it this way. If you worked as a security guard for any random corporation and someone came off the street half naked and claimed he was the chief financial officer, would you let him in? Back then, they didn't have facial ID, so they had no idea how the representative of the king will look like. Probably not even Prince Albrecht. The de facto ruler of Ahssûn doesn't know how we look like. Okay, so we start off as no one, got our ass kicked, sold off as a slave, and we essentially start in the slums of Ahssûn. I dig this. Also love that they established our main hero doesn't know how to fight, so it explains why he is so bad at everything. Now, before we jump into the story proper, let me give you one important spoiler, because it's really not a spoiler, nor is it made clear why the developers chose this route. Specifically, the character's name. Our main hero isn't nameless like in Gothic 1 or 2. He actually has a name. But for over 80% of the game, that name is hidden for no good purpose. I'm quite serious. It serves no greater design in the story, and the reveal just falls flat. And it's not like the character suddenly forgot his name and identity, and it's a big reveal. He isn't royalty. He is not a long-lost heir or a politician or great fortune. They just kept his name hidden for no logical purpose. So, spoiler alert, his name is Nathaniel. So from now on, Nathaniel is our main hero. Boom, spoiler. It's not like there is any other Nathaniel in the Gothic series. So yeah, Nathaniel's the king's representative, now turned beggar. Moving on, I personally have a conspiracy theory about Legend of Ahssun, and I'll be gathering clues. Call me paranoid at the end, but let's see if the evidence supports my theory. It's more of a just theory, so don't take it too serious. My theory is this. There was inner conflict within the Ahssûn development and writing team, and half of the team wanted to go in one direction, the other team wanted to go in another. As I said, I'll be presenting my arguments throughout the review, and if anyone from the Legend of Ahssun team sees this video and wants to comment and just wants to call me a paranoid old cook, I am more than open to feedback. Again, this is a joke conspiracy theory, but I feel like there were some contradictions in the game that made no sense. Now, the early game of Ahssun is wonderful. Ahssun is a full conversion mod, meaning the entire map is handcrafted for it. In addition to that, it has its own graphics pack and assets. We start in the slums of the city. A friendly guard lays it down for us. The guards at the gate won't let in a pantless hero to see the prince, and we need to work our way up. My playthrough was unofficially dubbed the Quest for Better Pants, which in a nutshell is what Ahssun is really about. We're actually so low on the social ladder, we have to visit the soup kitchen for food to heal up. I love it. And before you ask, no, I'm not gonna talk about what happens in the slums brothel. If you wanna find out, you go play that. Totally skipping that part. Now, I'm in love with stories and games that have you start as the underdog and have to earn every little victory. The early game in Ahssun essentially revolves around spending time with the poor of the society and the unwanted and the unwashed and the unemployed and forgotten. Basically everybody in Nathaniel's situation. There is also a cool Easter egg with a guy called Amasius. The devs used the face of the nameless hero for him, so nice insert there. We even try out combat with our limited resources. Interestingly enough, our combat skills start out as 0 instead of 10% like it was in Gothic 2. We can get to 10% either by spending learning points, which is inefficient, or by killing stuff. so it's a limited learn by doing system, up to 10%. You get weapon skill, for example in bows, by killing enemies with a bow. The trigger to actually level up the bow isn't how many enemies you kill, but their experience value. So if you kill a skeleton that gives you 300 experience upon death, that's the same as killing 30 meat bugs worth 10 XP each. Back to the slums. We're playing this one on normal difficulty, that being the intended difficulty for the game. There's also a few sliders we can adjust before you start the game, such as difficulty or respawning enemies. I am not a fan of respawning enemies in Gothic games, especially since the code doesn't really work all too well. I've seen enemies like trolls spawn in the monastery or inhabited places, and I don't want important NPCs to die due to that. There is also the design issue of having respawning enemies giving you infinite experience, thus making it possible to attain an uber god level in the first part of the game. In the slums, we learn from the poor people, taxes are problematic and so stupidly high that even the craftsmen end up in the poor district if they can't keep up with them. We meet a blacksmith that once had his own forge, but he lost it. This is interesting world building here because blacksmiths back in the Middle Ages and late Middle Ages were very valued. They would be the equivalent of brain surgeons today or full stack developers. Companies and hospitals would trample over each other to get a good one. In the Middle Ages, blacksmiths would oftentimes be spared in war due to how rare a good one was. Everybody needed them. You are a farmer, you needed tools. You are a rider, you needed horseshoes. You are a king or a lord, you definitely needed weapons and armor. You didn't kill blacksmiths, and most surely you wouldn't send them to the slums. Okay, let's start the tick scale. Prince Albrecht is already getting a -10 for losing his best people to taxes. Idiot. Eventually, we curry some favor with the local authorities in the slums, and we also meet up with two interesting characters, namely Rufus and Calvin. Rufus is a poor guy, but he does have a small shack, so that puts him pretty high on the social ladder here. We later find out he's in deep debt, and he needs help delivering a message to his hunter friend, a guy called Triss. Rufus promises us some clothes so we can finally enter the city. Okay, so 2 hours in the game and we finally have a direction in how to upgrade our social status. We delivered the message, but a few days later the guards say Rufus was found dead in his home. We uncover a threatening message in his hut that his time ran out. Poor Rufus. We meet Calvin in Rufus's house at night, and seems he was an opportunist looting the place. Can't really blame him since I was doing the same. We strike a deal with Calvin here. Seems the guard took Rufus's body and belongings to the local guardhouse as evidence. Calvin offers to teach us sneaking and lockpicking if he can keep part of the plunder. Well, we're desperate, so we gotta do what we gotta do. Calvin, by the way, will be this game's version of Kessel from Arkelos. We'll run into him later on. So we sneak into the guardhouse and steal a dead man's clothes. Ah, the spirit of Gothic. Smell that grey morality. Rags unlocked. We head on to the city gates and the guards let us through because we have pants now. We finally enter the city of Ahssûn. Gotta say, love the game's progression so far. It's taken us real life hours to get so far. Our main character is still bad at combat, low level enemies are still a menace, and every little upgrade feels like a godsend. As for the city, it looks beautiful. Smaller than it seems and the layout is partially confusing, but it does hold up. What doesn't look beautiful, and I'm sorry to go there, is the sky. If you play with the recommended texture pack specifically crafted for Ahssûn, you're gonna get this murky, muddy yellow sky color palette. I hate it. I don't know why I hate it so much, but maybe because it just feels unnatural. It gives off this impression of an industrial city so polluted that you cannot see the clouds anymore. The messed up thing is this can be fixed temporarily. If you have the 3D renderer installed, you can just go into the light settings, tweak some numbers and bam, lovely blue sky. So I'm gonna chalk up the conspiracy evidence with the sky. Everything in the game has a beautiful asset and model, well, at least for the Gothic engine, so why is the sky so ugly? Throughout the playthrough, I try to keep fixing it, but at one point I simply give up. Back to the city. We chat with some people and we find out 3 important things. Number 1 is that we're not gonna be allowed to see the prince unless we have the backing of a powerful guild. Well, that was predictable. Number 2, we can make some money by apprenticing to a master in the city. And number 3, there was a political revolution in the city and a local lord took half of the guard and left to found his own camp in the mountains. His name is Wulfgar, and he's gonna be important later on. Suffice to say there's only one iron mine on the island and Wulfgar strategically took control of it. Guild-wise, we have 3 choices, which are similar to Gothic 2. We either join the city guard, the monastery of the water mages, or we join the free camp of rebels led by Wulfgar. I personally didn't fancy the idea of joining the city guard or the equivalent of mercenaries and was in the mood to play a mage. But before we do that, we must do what any self-respecting player does in a Gothic game, aka loot everything not nailed to the ground. Seriously, we would loot the ground if we could. Among the things that we loot is a new pant upgrade. Yay, from rags to servant's clothes. Upgrades, people. And 5 seconds later, we get a citizen's clothing. Robbing the tailor was definitely the best idea. Now let's start working on a profession. We can either become a tailor, a carpenter, a blacksmith, an alchemist, or even a painter. Well, it's a German mod, so I really don't want to become a failed painter. I know where that leads. Though realistically, in a game you can make money choosing any profession, so don't really sweat it. The tailor makes armors. As a painter you can make dyes and paintings, and the carpenter is geared towards archers where you can make various types of arrows and poisons. I chose the blacksmith route because it sounded interesting and it paired well with the two-handed melee build I was working on. Now what follows is a Gothic 2-esque style where we ask for the blessings of all the masters to become an apprentice to somebody. Once that's done, we can become an apprentice, right? Nope. We have to pay a tax to join the local guild and also read the Ahssûn tax code. Yeah, you know it's a German mod if you have to read tax codes. And we're finally a blacksmith, yay! Similar to other mods, you can craft weapons and sell them at a premium. It's quite profitable. Now at this point we can also afford a new leather armor, so upgrades again. The quest for pants moves on. I'm not gonna cover all of the quests you can do in the city, but most of them are okay and a few are really cool. One of the best is the Lover's Quest. There's also an NPC called Lucigoth, which was one of the main bug testers in Ahssûn. Throughout your playthrough, you'll encounter bugs, which are items to pick up. You can trade the bugs you find to Lucy for some cool bonuses. The best bonus is a helmet we'll find later on. Shame I can't actually tell him of some of the critical bugs I find. In the city, we can drop down a well and there we discover a skeleton and a mysterious magical mirror. If we activate the mirror at midnight, it will teleport us to the ghost of a woman with a tragic love tale. Her name is Lúthien, and if there are any Tolkien buffs out there, yes, her lover is called Beren. For those who don't know, in the Silmarillion book, Beren was a human and Lúthien Tinuviel was an ancient elf lady. She fell in love with Beren, and when it came that he died, she went to the elven god of death and sung to him that for the only time in history, he relented and was moved to pity. He released the soul of Beren to her under the condition she renounce her elven immortality and live a normal mortal life with him. It's considered one of the most beautiful love stories ever written, so much so that on Tolkien's grave one reads Beren and for his wife Tinuviel. In Ahssûn, the lovers were separated by tragic circumstance, but we can bring them together. Once that's done, one of the rewards we can ask for is for them to scare one of the wealthiest noblemen in the city, a guy called Forian, to donate 100 gold pieces to every poor person in the city. We have our own Ghost Scare Squad cosplaying as Hector Robin Hood. Honestly, this is the peak of the game right here. Go Team Lúthien and Beren. On top of that, we get the option to lift the curse of their undeath so they can embrace each other. This quest is filled with everything: emotion, humor, tragic love, unexpected twists, and combat. And sadly, it's all downhill from here. What I mean from this is that the rest of the game has a neutral emotional tone. You don't really care about what's going on with the character or other characters, and you don't feel invested in either a positive or a negative tone. One of the reasons that happens is due to the story happening on 2 levels. Remember the dissonance I was talking about, my little conspiracy theory? Yeah, let's circle back to that. So essentially the story in Ahssûn is on 2 levels. The first level is the realistic one, the grounded one, where Nathaniel is trying to get some better pants, so the guards take him seriously and let him visit the prince. The secondary level is the mystical level of the story. There's some Google translated books we find in the game that detail how an ancient god war happened. It basically culminated with the avatar of evil being defeated, the gods were banished from this world, mankind got free will, and the church was pretty much mostly ceremonial. Magic wasn't as strong either according to what we read. This second level of the story clashes a lot with the first one. At no point in the story do we get any motivation why Nathaniel should care about it until, well, you'll see that something happens pretty soon. The point I'm trying to make here is that the game initially gives you the impression of a grounded story, but like a lot of Gothic mods, it quickly veers into the mystical, magical doodads that we have to collect, destroy, and etc. This type of story can work, don't get me wrong. I mean, you got Lord of the Rings, The Eye of the World, Brandon Sanderson, plenty of offers that made this work. The issue in Ahssûn is that after a certain point, there's no emotional level to the second level of the narrative. There's no emotional level to the mystical one. We just don't care. We came to Ahssûn and ended up looking for pants. Not avatars of evil, not about fighting gods. Back to the story. We explore the island for some more points of interest and we find a cool armor recipe made out of minecrawler plates. It's not the same armor as Gothic 1 or 2, but it's an upgrade. Bug armor unlocked. One point of interest close to the city is Orin's farm on the south side. Orin is basically a slumlord that rents plots on his land to farmers and treats them like crap. Here we get another design dissonance clue, aka the Orin and Oswald questline. Oswald is an old man that owns a house on Orin's farm. Orin, the slumlord, really wants a reason to kick Oswald off the farm and get his property. Speaking with the local farmers, we learn they aren't really happy with how things are going, and one of them proposes we loot Orin's pantry of goodies. Oswald is also in on this. More thievery, sign me up. So we sneak in the cover of night like the little goblin we are. No matter what we do, it's scripted that we get caught. I wasted a bunch of time and saves testing that. Here we have 2 dialogue options. We can either A, fess up and tell Orin this was Oswald's idea, or B, we can lie and cover for Oswald and protect the old man. My instinct was to protect the old man. Here's the issue. Here's the rub. If we do that, aka protect the old man, the quest ends and we get locked out of the good ending in this quest line. By protecting the old man, we end up dooming him. In order to protect him in the long run, we have to betray him. What? What? How the hell does that make sense? The designer that made this quest built it this way. See, if we betray Oswald, later on we get a dialogue with Orin. Orin wants the old man's house and will use the attempted thievery as a legal excuse to seize Oswald's house. It's at this point where we can get a positive ending for Oswald. We can turn the tables on Orin and the old man gets to keep his house. I reiterate, to end up here, we need to betray the old man without knowing that's the correct moral choice. This quest and a few others soured the game for me. The problem, I will repeat in this review, is that for every good quest or design decision Ahssûn makes, it also makes another poor one. I've never encountered a mod that was so perfectly balanced between good and bad. Here's another example, the map design. This is the map of Ahssûn. Once we start exploring the forests, we start getting lost. For real, a huge chunk of the woodlands looked the same for me, and not only that, at one point I was wondering if the forests even made sense in game. It took me a very long time to figure out what was bugging me about the Ahssûn map design. And it was the vegetation. Besides the fact that it's way too dense, if we're talking about a jungle environment, that's fine. But if we are talking about a forest, it's too much. The tree-lined canopy is so dense that barely any sunlight is filtered through the leaves. This creates a situation where a few bushes or plants should grow organically. Couple that with the constant murky, dirty sky color and somewhat desaturated forests, they just feel unnatural. I don't know if this was an intentional art design choice or simply somebody on the texture team made a call to make everything brown and gray and yellowing, but I don't know, it just gives me this unsettling mood to the eyes. Most forest locations look so much like 40 different locations on Ahssûn that you can't even figure out where you are. Simply put, the map doesn't feel like a real, natural, and organically grown forest, rather something artificial. Let me give you a quick contrast to a regular forest in Gothic 2. Watch this, and tell me if it feels like this forest would grow naturally, and then contrast it with this much vegetation in Ahssûn. Look at the tree canopy and tell me how much water you'd think it is in the ground to keep these plants alive. The mod is overall okay. Please don't take this as a sign of as if I'm bashing or nitpicking or just for the sake of it, but some choices in the game feel like they're more like barriers against player immersion. Maybe it's just me? What do you think? If you've played Ahssûn, did it give you the impression that the map wasn't something you could find in a real-life situation? Or is it just my imagination? I'm also curious to see your comments and hear your thoughts on the color palette choice for the sky and the general atmosphere. Anyway, rant over, I'm sorry, I had to get out of my chest. Here's a breakdown of the mechanics you can find in the game. You can pause the video and read them at your leisure. There's also an English AI you can actually download for Legend of Ahssun. Yeah, it's pretty okay for the most part. It does have your usual voice AI issues, like it sometimes switches to an entirely different voice, but overall, it's actually pretty decent, so you can download it from Nexus Mods. It's a simple install, just drag and drop it into your data and system folder.
Do you know how I can get decent clothes to get into town?
If you could go to the middle quarter, I would send you to the tailor.
Another idea?
I can't help you with that. Maybe you should talk to Rufus.
We eventually make our way to the Monastery of the Water Mages. It's well designed and has colorful characters. At least this was a change of pace. We do the usual get us to trust you questline, from transforming into a sheep, to impress a mage, to getting some weed for the boys, to giving a novice a lute so he can fiddle his strings at night. After that's done, they give us the magic dress. Yeah, it's a robe, I just like to call it the manly dress. New pant upgrade unlocked. The manly dress. Here is where the game sort of goes off the rails narrative-wise. So far, everything's been mostly logical. We need to go to the prince, but to do that, we need the backing of a powerful guild. So the guards at the gates take us seriously. Makes sense, I can roll with that. But now that we're a mage, we get to the leader of the monastery, a wizened man called Carador. He tells us that we've been summoned to help the water mages on an expedition to the swamp. The expedition is to uncover a powerful artifact, which is the equivalent of a magical nuclear bomb by the sounds of it. This would be a great side quest, but at no point during the super freaking 20-minute dialogue with Carador do we ever get the option to say, "Hey dude, I'm literally the representative of the king, and on his authority, I command you to take me to the prince because I have an urgent matter to attend to." So we're basically railroaded to play Indiana Jones to find this artifact instead of doing the main quest. Fine, fuck it. I forgot to add that in Ahssûn we do get additional items to wear, such as bracelets and hats. They do have a nice selection, but it's a shame we don't get an Indiana Jones hat to go with this one. The closest one would be a farmer's hat. We head on to the swamp and meet the team. There are 4 important NPCs in this expedition, and they will be relevant later on. We got Magus, a cryptic mage who is classified as a natural mage, born once in a generation, able to cast powerful spells without the aid of runes. We got Adrian, a snarky researcher. He's also sharing my name, unfortunately. We got Carador, the leader of the monastery, and we got our old buddy Calvin, the guy who helped us steal a dead man's clothes. As you can expect, he handles the logistics. We get a long briefing cutscene about what we're doing in the swamp. We are on the hunt for an ancient artifact, specifically a book, from antediluvian times back when the gods made their world a playground. Seems the expedition was done professionally. We got supplies, porters, diggers, carpenters, guards, the whole shebang. We have a long briefing with the mages, the kind that could have been an email, and I do mean long. We have what is an almost 30-minute dialogue cutscene. Jesus, we're here to find a powerful book and explore the ruins. What follows is a well-done adventure, and we do fight some monsters, somebody goes missing, we plant some drugs, solve some puzzles, and at the end everybody falls unconscious. Seems there's an unnatural power exerting influence over the swamps. Not clear if it's a curse or if it is the book itself doing this. One of the mages, Adrian, gives the best quote in the game, namely this.
Und nochmal ganz nebenbei. Der Magie ist es scheißegal, auf was sie trifft. Das gilt auch für euch zwei.
Magic doesn't give a shit what it encounters. Fantastic. It's one of the best quotes in fantasy literature, if you ask me. And this will be the foreshadowing for the rest of the story. Seems that our investigation revealed that the swamps grew on top of a massive collapsed orcish temple. We find the entrance and jump in. Once we load in, we're greeted by a horrible underwater visual effect. I'm honestly mind-boggled if this was by design or just a major overlooked bug. It's making me queasy and seasick, and I don't get seasick in real life. Now, to be fair, I've seen playthroughs of people who didn't experience this bug, so it was probably on my version of Ahssûn. I did manage to install a Union mod that completely removes the underwater effect, so it's now playable. Thing is, I've seen people playing Legend of Ahssun and they actually did this portion of the game with the stupid underwater filter active. Crazy people. Hats off to you. In some cases, I suspect they played a different version of the mod. Where the bug didn't happen, I don't know. Anyway, the temple is pretty cool. We fight some undead, some orcish generals, we find some secrets like an orcish love potion, and we get to the main hall eventually. Surprisingly, there is no traditional boss fight, just a few orc undead and some stone sentinels guarding the book. We approach the book and see it's titled The Book of Awakening. With such an ominous title, what follows is appropriately ironic. As soon as Nathaniel touches it, he collapses to the floor and the screen fades to black. Nathaniel later wakes up in the monastery under the wary gaze of Carador. He tells us that after touching the book, Nathaniel died. Yep. Kicked the bucket. Magus performed the equivalent of a meatball surgery on Nathaniel's soul and managed to stitch Nath back together. Most of him. Call Nathaniel Patches from this part on. We have a chat with Carador and he's worried if Patches is altogether up there. Time will tell. The book we recovered hasn't arrived at the monastery and we're sent in to check it out. On top of that, we're bombarded with a ton of side quests since, you guessed it, we're in Chapter 3 now. One of the side quests is to journey across the wasteland with a curious mage interested in studying the crystals on the island. It's at this point that we have picked up a ton of these crystals and they can be essentially traded in for some buffs. The wasteland is a peculiar area of the map. You can explore it right at the start of the game, but there are some high-level enemies there. On top of that, the wasteland exerts a negative effect of magical powers, namely, it drains your mana. To top things off, at random points, Nathaniel drops on the ground writhing in pain. So, if you're in combat, good luck. After exploring enough spots on the cursed land, the friendly mage Oculus gifts us an amulet of fire protection. Awesome! Because, with the same amulet, we can bypass a wall of fire we found in a cave. Wonder what's behind the wall of fire? Huge cave, enemies... Oh, and a dragon? Well, we can't have that. Really weird placement for an enemy if you ask me. Not necessarily that there's a dragon, but there's nothing we can do with this piece of information. We cannot alert the monastery, the mages, the guards, anyone. We fought a real-life dragon, killed it, and we can't even brag about it. but we can make armor of its hide. So early in chapter 3, roughly at the midpoint of the game, you get the best armor possible. Strange design, but I'll take it. Dragon armor unlocked. We also find an optional area that has a cursed boss fight. Behind a waterfall, we encounter a spooky grave, and as soon as we touch the stone coffin, all hell breaks loose. By all hell, I mean a bunch of undead spawn, which in itself isn't much. We're in a cursed land, so the undead are par for the course. The issue is their spawning script is bugged as hell, and they endlessly respawn. If the game doesn't want to play fair, neither will I. I managed to kill the endlessly respawning skeletons with some magic, and eventually we get to talk to an orc ghost. He gives us an interesting story how in the last orc-human war, people were dragged here to be tortured. Seems this island originally belonged to the orcs and the humans came here to conquer them. That's a change of pace from the typical Gothic narrative where the orcs are the conquering warlords. Anyway, I wanted to point out this optional area for a purpose. You can visit this place as soon as chapter 1, but oh man, this game does have some bugs. This is one of them. I also felt the need to vent my frustration for this entire area. Whether it was done with purpose or neglect, the cursed land of Ahssûn completely deserves its name. Oh, and there's also an Easter egg I never figured out, or a secret. It's a chest here in this cave. Does anybody know how to access it? Let's talk about the music and the mood for a second. For general atmosphere, it's a Gothic game, true and true. The music is good, it was composed by Raphael and Jakob Meyer, and it blends well with the atmosphere. My issue is that there's too few tracks and they are also mixed in with the original Gothic soundtrack, so you will be hearing some repetition. The main theme is awesome, although the volume levels for individual instruments feel a bit off for some reason. Moving on, we eventually managed to locate the expedition caravan. It's been ambushed, color me surprised, and there's only one survivor. He ran away when the ambush happened, and I can commend that attitude. Some people might call that cowardly, but it's the survivors that live to tell the tale. We comb the area and find some axes and some knives. One of them has an inscription. Our journey is going to take us to the free camp to find the owner of these weapons. Before we go there, I want to preface something. Nathaniel's motivations haven't shifted. Despite just coming back from the dead, his goal is the same. Report to the prince, find out who stole Nathaniel's identity, and gather intel for the king. Nathaniel's personality hasn't changed. He's still a cold, arrogant ass, even more so after coming back from the dead. He hasn't turned into a goody two-shoes, ready to jump in and fix everybody's problems for free. Yeah, did I mention that throughout the playthrough? Nathaniel is quite a bit of an asshole. Like, as a player, you can choose to help other people, but in a lot of dialogue scenarios where you just let Nathaniel talk, he's an arrogant fucking bastard. I don't want to say he's on Joffrey levels of annoyance from Game of Thrones, but sometimes he comes very freaking close. So why does he care about some book, an ambush, or who is behind it? He doesn't. The game is simply forcing us down this path. We're being railroaded. Back to the free camp. It's a collection of mercenaries, traders, miners, and veteran fighters led by a man called Wulfgar. Wulfgar used to be the right hand of the prince, but he got fed up with the state of the kingdom. All this island did was tax everybody to bits, from having a stamp tax, a gold mine tax, a tax to farm. So many taxes that even the blacksmiths ended up in the gutter. Can you imagine having so many taxes in a country that professionals end up in the gutter? Professionals that society relies on? All those taxes ended up on the continent to rich families that never worked a day in their lives. So Wulfgar got sick of it, took the cream of the crop of the guard, took control of the local ruins and the only iron mine on the island. Thus he established his own little fief there, and now he's waiting for a political opportunity. Eventually, the camp attracted more people, including the mages that are paying Wulfgar to study the local ruins. Here we do a bunch of jobs to earn the camp's favor, from fighting in the arena, dealing with some smugglers, and even solve an interesting chess puzzle as an optional adventure. Eventually, we track down a solid lead from the local blacksmith. Seems the weapons we recover from the ambush site belong to bandits. Go figure. Now here things start taking a turn for the worse. We hook up with our old buddy Calvin, you know, the one who helped us rob a corpse at the beginning of our story. Calvin, alongside with some muscle, join us in investigating the local dive called the Crep. It's the local bar where the shady people on the island meet to gamble, drink, and strike deals with corrupt guards. Now what follows is an in-game cutscene where we have no control over what happens. Sorry, it's low resolution. Oh, cool.
Jetzt geht's zur Sache.
Das gibt's doch gar nicht.
Weg mit der Waffe.
Verdammt, was ist los?
Also gut, Freunde. Wir suchen hier das bekannte Gold in der Morgenstunde. Es stehen nur 2 Fragen im Raum und irgendeiner von euch erbärmlichen Kakerlaken wird sie uns beantworten.
Als ob ich nicht schon genug Probleme hätte.
Wo liegt das Banditenlager auf der Insel und wie kommt man dort hinein?
Die freien Lager denken, die könnten machen, was sie wollen.
Okay.
Weißt du was darüber? Bist du schon mal dort gewesen? Wir müssten was mit ihrem Anführer besprechen. Ist nur eine Kleinigkeit.
Verdammt, was soll dieser Scheiß? Verschwinde von hier und nimm deine Freunde gleich wieder mit. Was denkst du, wer du hier bist?
Du weißt verdammt genau, was ich will.
Hey, ich bin nur Zuschauer. Ich helfe niemandem und hindere auch keinen. Bei mir ist jeder willkommen, wenn er bezahlt.
Und für was haben die Banditen dich so bezahlt? Na los, red schon.
Was du wissen solltest, ist, dass sie doch nahezu überall sind.
war's für
oder?
dich, Das gibt's doch gar nicht.
Immer feste drauf. Was für ein brutaler Kerl.
Schau an, da will es wohl jemand wissen. Ich nämlich auch. Also, wo habt ihr euer Versteck? Wie kommt man dort hinein?
Die Pest auf dich und den Rest von euch.
Oh, das war die falsche Antwort. Das geschieht hier in diesem Land mit dreisten Verbrechern. Und der Rest von euch gibt hoffentlich bald eine Antwort, bevor ich wieder die Beherrschung verliere.
Doch nur noch mehr Ärger.
Mal sehen. Du bist doch der Kopf dieser kleinen Bande. Erzähl mir was, oder dir wird es schlimmer ergehen als deinen beiden Freunden.
Ich habe mit Zelt nichts zu tun. Habe ihn noch nicht mal zu Gesicht bekommen, sondern nur mit seinen Leuten gehandelt. Keine Ahnung, was ihr Verrückten von ihm wollt.
Ah, der kann ja reden. Said ist also der Name des Anführers. Nur weiter, ich bin ein aufmerksamer Zuhörer. Wenn du mir alle Fragen beantwortest, kannst du gehen.
Das Hauptlager ist im Süden von Ahssûn und nordöstlich des Hafens. Hinter einem See geht ein schmaler Weg durch den Fels, der von Zels Leuten bewacht wird. Wer sie überzeugt, wird vorbeigelassen. Wer nicht, erschossen.
Ach, du redest viel, aber ohne etwas zu sagen. Was, verdammt, muss man ihnen erzählen, um passieren zu können?
Weiß ich nicht mehr. Zu lange ist es her, dass ich dort war.
Das bekommen wir schon hin. Fitch, ich brauche dich mal hier und sammle ein paar Messer ein.
Finger weg.
Gibt's doch. Ihr kranken Dreckskerle.
Ach, ich habe doch großes Vertrauen bezüglich deiner Kooperation. Also habe ich einen Finger ausgewählt, den du nicht allzu sehr vermissen wirst. Aber bald hast du gar keine Finger mehr, denn unserem Fitch hier scheint Gefallen daran zu finden.
Ich sagte doch, dass ich das Lösungswort wirklich nicht mehr weiß.
Na dann?
Das ist brutal. Nein.
Nach dem letzten Finger wirst du deine Augen verlieren. Aber wenn der Scharfrichter dir die Schlinge um den Hals legt, ist das auch bedeutungslos.
Nein, 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 genug. Es reicht. Mein Geld liegt in Saints Händen. Das waren die Worte. Ob die sich geändert haben, weiß ich aber wirklich nicht.
Mein Geld liegt in Saids Händen? Ah, vielen Dank.
Ich hab dir alles gesagt, was ich weiß. Du hast selbst gesagt, ich kann gehen.
Das war gelogen.
Nein, nein, genug.
Gut, das sollte es gewesen sein. Wir haben, was wir wollten. Sag Kelvin und den anderen, dass wir los können.
Das hier ist schwer aus dem Ruder gelaufen. Sowas muss ich nicht wieder haben.
Wir treffen uns beim Steinbruch.
Was hast du getan?
3 Probleme aus der Welt geschafft, denke ich doch mal.
Du glaubst, du kannst hier in meiner Kneipe 3 Mann umlegen und kommst damit durch?
Ja.
Das wird für dich bestimmt noch ein Nachspiel haben. Du hast dich mit gefährlichen Menschen angelegt. Um die 3 Schwachköpfe tut es mir nicht leid. Aber der Mann, zu dem sie gehören, der macht mir Angst.
Jesus, this was a very... Basically, Nathaniel goes berserk, full Punisher style, straight up tortures a guy and then murders 3 people with a dozen witnesses around. He eventually gets a password from one of them to infiltrate the local bandit group. Calvin even questions Nathaniel's sanity and what got into him at the bar, and old Patches just shrugs it off as if it was nothing. Nathaniel's sanity is fraying fast, it seems. We make our way into a dense forest and find a bandit camp. It is what other characters have described so far. A collection of cutthroats, slavers, a few pirates, and even a necromancer. As you can imagine, the trope falls in line and we have to do a bunch of jobs for these crooks in order to see their boss. I'm gonna skip describing this entire part of the game simply because the game kinda lost the narrative hooks in me. If I was a fish, the fisherman just lost his dinner. My issue is, we're doing anything but the main goal of getting Nathaniel to see the prince. There is around 3 encounters worth mentioning here. We help a necromancer deal with a spooky spirit haunting us, and that's a fun and creepy quest. We meet a crazy sadistic fellow with an eye patch, which we later duel. From his body, we loot a letter detailing how he was an assassin contracted to kill a rival king. In addition to that, the letter suggests orcs are about to invade the island. There's clues about a group of people playing with the geopolitical fate of the world, but nothing comes off of that. We also help out the poor dude with some digestion issues. Eventually, the leader of the camp spills the beans. Seems the mages were betrayed by their own members. 2 of the expedition mages and leaders of the monastery, aka Adrian and Magus, contracted the bandits to ambush their own expedition to steal the book we recovered from the temple, the same book that killed Nathaniel. Why did they did that? We don't know, but I gotta say this twist of events actually made me curious to find out exactly what happened. Especially Magus. Adrian I get, he's presented as an arrogant prick throughout the game, so he fits the psychotype. But Magus is the one that saved Nathaniel's life. He could have just as well said, "Sorry, beyond my powers, can't bring somebody from the dead." We run back to the monastery, report to Carador about our findings. He's shocked and finally starts taking us seriously. He also gives us a letter of authorization to see the prince. And to top everything off, he also teleports us to the castle. Thanks. All it took was Nathaniel almost dying, infiltrating a bandit camp, finding out about an impending orc attack, and the betrayal of the top mages on the island of Ahssûn. This is one of those situations that could have been solved with the medieval equivalent of an email. Hold on to that sentence, by the way, because we later find out Carador can actually send an email, so my frustration is perfectly justified. Only took 50 real-life hours to get here. And if you think we are suddenly rewarded with a visit to the prince, you're dead wrong. We get teleported into the castle and meet the imposter, the guy who stole Nathaniel's identity, his clothes, and diplomatic papers. He's a nobody? He's not presented as a character in-game, neither in the introductory cutscene. So who was he? The ship's navigator. His name is Grom. Unassuming name, but totally a very assuming asshole. Nathaniel confronts him and Grom eventually recognizes who he is. As you'd suspect, he immediately summons the guards and we are arrested. And not just arrested, we are thrown into the arena. Again. If you recall, right in the intro cutscene, Nathaniel relates how he was captured by bandits and sold as a slave in the arena fighting pits. He survived, mostly by luck, and thrown into the gutter. Now we're in the arena again, but this time Nathaniel actually knows how to fight. I'd also like to segue into something I noticed in the introductory cutscene. Nathaniel says the crew was carefully selected by Gaimar, the king's chief of intelligence. This makes me suspect that Gaimar isn't very good at his job, or he intentionally sabotaged the mission. Lot of political plots going on behind the scenes. Back to the situation at hand. Our gear is taken away and we are naked. We can only climb out of here through scheduled arena fights and basically kick everybody's ass. We promptly do so, and Grom, the fake advisor, even graces us with some assassins trying to take Nathaniel out. We get in touch with our arena squad master, a cuckoo old guy who has a bunch of funny lines.
Wirklich einen Dachschaden,
Proof damage.
oder?
Nein, ich habe die Arena selbst gebaut und die hat sicher kein leckendes Dach.
Before we become the arena champion, the arena master, a shady Gaul called Ryan, tells us we can make a pile of gold and get out of the arena if we throw the final fight. If we choose to lose on purpose, we'll be allowed to leave via a back door. If we defy him and win the fight, he comes to our cell and murders us. So we can't even become the arena champion. Man, this game is really testing my frustration threshold. We throw the fight and leave, but I'm salty for payback now. We recover our gear and Nathaniel's sword is sharper than ever. We'll cut our way through every guard if we need to get to Grom. As soon as we reach the castle gates, our mage buddy Carador is there waiting for us. He's curious why we haven't talked to the prince yet, and Nathaniel brings the mage up to speed. Carador, for once, actually does something useful and believes Nathaniel. He puts the guards in the courtyard to sleep so we can finally see the prince. Carador went up a few points on the dick scale for this one. Took us only 60 hours. Hope our pants are fancy enough for this encounter. We finally meet the man in charge, Prince Albrecht, the king's son, and he's actually a pretty decent guy, surprisingly. He actually suspected Grom of not being who he was because of the vocabulary and mannerisms being a dead giveaway. Kinda makes sense, since if you are born into high society, they do expect you to talk and act in a certain way. But the reason why Prince Albrecht acts on his suspicions is what really made me raise my eyebrows. He basically suggests he figured out Grom wasn't who he was supposed to be, but also that he preferred it that way. The prince doesn't want daddy getting into his business. On one hand, I can respect that attitude. On the other, why would you keep a suspicious guy as an advisor knowing he was a fake? He could be a spy or an assassin for all you know. The prince also starts making some good decisions, like closing down the arena, revisiting the death penalty, and distributing resources to the poor quarter. We also piece together some clues and figure out that Adrian the traitor mage contracted an assassin to murder the neighboring king of Kemara, the same assassin we found and killed in the bandit camp. I gotta say, the narrative dissonance is rearing its ugly head again. I mean, on one hand, sure, what we encounter as a player is one thing, yet the character around us, especially Nathaniel, are so interested in the general political situation around the world. The issue is, we don't really get to influence the politics around us or get any say in how things are run. We're just bombarded with a load of political relation information and don't get to do anything with that. So I'm gonna chalk up another point on the dissonant design this game has. The closest thing to us deciding the political situation of the world so far is killing an assassin, and we didn't even know he was an assassin at the time. Anyway, as soon as we get to finally do the job we're assigned to, shit has already hit the fan. The orcs have invaded, the army is scrambling, the gold mine and port have already been wiped out and conquered. But we have a more pressing matter now. Dealing with Grom. Oh boy, this is gonna be good. Time to visit the cells and... oh. Cutscene time? Seems we're being railroaded again. Nathaniel blacks out again, wakes up in a bath, and the local torturer and executioner asks what to do about the remains. Seems old Patches lost it, ordered the executioner to torture Grom and execute him. Nathaniel doesn't remember anything, but he jots down something in his journal called Odium of Deception. Interesting phrase, Odium of Deception. The only connections I can make to that word is either the word odious or the character odium from the Brandon Sanderson Stormlight books. In the books, odium is this supernatural being called a Spren, often manipulating entire races for his own benefit. He is basically an evil god, but he does have some mystery to him. I wonder if something is also manipulating Nathaniel to black out and go full psycho. Back to reality, we have a few pressing issues to deal with. Number one is that the orcs are on the island and have taken the gold mine and the port. That's actually a brilliant strategic move, and respect to the writers. Taking the port means preventing reinforcements to Ahssûn, and taking the gold mine, while seemingly a pointless move, can actually cripple the economy on the island. The forests around the island are teeming with small skirmishes between the army and the orcs, and sadly, the orcs are coming up on top. We hook up with General Oric's men, but after finding out what we're dealing with, he doesn't even have enough men to assault neither the gold mine nor the port. That leaves us with reporting to the prince on a course of action. The prince has no choice. He has to ask for help from Wulfgar, the self-proclaimed leader of the Free Camp. Chatting with Wulfgar, we actually get quite a nice dialogue exchange where Nathaniel proves he has some diplomatic mojo and gives some good arguments. If Wulfgar stands by and lets the orcs and troops battle it out, even if he emerges victorious, the entire island will be a pile of rubble, and that's what he will rule. Wulfgar agrees to help in exchange for some heavy concessions. Most of all, he wants the island to secede from the kingdom of Lalvenia, and the prince to give that in writing. Also, he wants some trading rights. As much as I dislike Wulfgar, he read the political situation perfectly and knew when and how to play his hand. Man, I sympathize with the prince. Being sent here to rule the biggest colony of your kingdom, being on the brink of losing it, and to save its inhabitants, you have to use whatever power you have left to commit political treason in order to save your people. That's a tough choice. The prince agrees, and afterwards he has a monologue where he falls into despair. Can't blame him. We sign the treaty and get the troops ready. First stop is the port. It's a fun quest, we get a ton of troops under our control, and the liberation has satisfying combat. One interesting clue we gather after the fight is that the orcs raided the warehouse and stole all the gold hidden there. Every bar of gold and every scrap of it is gone. This clue will be relevant later. We get to the gold mine, which is filled with orcs, but more importantly, Adrian the mage is holed up there behind the deadly barrier. To bypass the barrier, we enlist the help of a fire mage, but man, he does take a while to think of a solution.
Lass mich nachdenken.
Okay, think faster, please. Come on. We also learn from this mage that Carador already informed him of our arrival via telepathy. Okay, this really crossed my bullshit limit. You mean to say the head of the monastery, the most powerful mage on the island, has long-distance telepathy? So he could have informed the prince about Nathaniel all this time instead of dicking around in the swamp? Dying for a book? Going to a bandit camp and investigating stuff? Okay, Carador really has some self-serving side of him. He uses Nathaniel perfectly. The story suddenly makes more sense now. Before we go to the gold mine, we get a chance to find the lost kitty. I don't know what to say at this point. I guess the writer dissonance crops now suddenly to make Nathaniel seem like a good guy. Chuck up another point for dissonant story. We go back to the gold mine, the barrier goes down, and then we confront Adrian. He's a sarcastic asshole as usual, but he does have a couple of insights for us. Number one is that Magus and Adrian allied themselves with the orcs, and the orcish mission was to extract all the gold out of the mine and move it to a safe place. Number two is that Adrian has an idea about Nathaniel's berserk condition, but he doesn't want to say anything more, except that Magus wanted to save Nathaniel's life for an occult purpose. We exhaust our dialogue options, fight Adrian, and end his threat. We recover a mysterious artifact from Adrian, which looks like a focus stone from Gothic 1. These stones basically focus immense magical power, allowing mages to cast spells of great proportions, such as destroying mountains or creating huge magical barriers. We return to Carador and report on the situation. Chapter 5: The Calamity. Seems things are accelerating now and the plot is moving at light speed. Lalvenian warships have docked in the port and are seeking to reclaim Ahssûn for the kingdom. They're also about to go head-to-head with a nearby Viranon fleet, but this doesn't really concern us since there's no naval warfare in the game. It's just basic text exposition. The conversation, which is 20 minutes long, is basically Nathaniel advising Carador on the diplomatic situation. Seems there's going to be a meeting on neutral ground between the political powers on Ahssûn. We sadly do not get to attend this meeting, which decides the fate of Ahssûn, which just reinforces the dissonant narrative design this game has. The game puts so much emphasis on politics, but when the powers that be finally meet up at the round table to discuss the situation, the best diplomat on the island isn't even invited to the table. So another point for the conflict table, I guess. Make the main character with a diplomat background, but deny him the most important diplomatic event in the game. At least give the player the option to participate or to refuse the meeting. Personally, I would have liked to participate in the meeting since Nathaniel has been central to many of these events. He was there when the cursed book was recovered. He was there when he found out about the orc invasion. He has contacts everywhere on the island, and he should be there to mediate the meeting between diplomatic players. But what do we get instead? We get to play Goeth again and go to the mages in the free camp to study the artifact we recover from the Adrian fight. We talk to the mage Selena, the only woman mage in the game. As an aside, by the way, Gothic needs more women wizards. Just saying. And we find out the following things. Number 1. The artifact recovered from Adrian is the petrified heart of the avatar of the god of evil. The petrified heart of a dragon. It just looks like a focus stone. Number 2. Is that the book we recover from the swamp is the Book of Summoning. It can summon the avatar into this world. Number 3. The orcs also want to bring back this avatar of evil, so they're helping Magus. Number 4 is that to power up this ritual, huge amounts of gold need to be consumed as fuel. Suddenly makes sense why the orcs stole all of the mined gold. And number 5, Magus is somewhere in the deep desert of Ahssûn in an orcish temple, performing a ritual to summon a big avatar baddie. Guess we're going to the desert next. We get up with whatever spells and potions we need, and I want to mention the economy a bit. It unfortunately doesn't have enough money sinks. We're flush with gold and have nothing to spend it on, which is kind of a shame. I've been banking up a lot of items, hoping to find some worthwhile potions or buffs to buy, but nada, zilch. Each new chapter didn't necessarily bring in new items to purchase. We head back to the monastery where apparently the great diplomatic meeting has ended. Typical. We missed all the fun. Seems the prince is dead. He jumped off of a tower. I can't really blame him since back home he'll be known as the prince who failed to keep the island of Ahssûn in the empire. At best, he'll be exiled. At worst, depending on the type of king Lolvenia has, he might be introduced to the concept of defenestration in the future. Ahssûn will fall under the control of Wulfgar, which, alongside other islands in the region, will form an independent kingdom. The neighboring kingdoms of Viranon and Kemara have declared war on each other, and Lolvenia is taking advantage of the situation. While all of this is interesting, we really don't have a say in anything. The politics in this game are just background noise at this point. The only good news is that the admiral that was sent in to replace Nathaniel takes a liking to him and wants to make him a governor of a nearby island after this mess is over. Well, at least Nathaniel has some job security in his future. We gear up and learn that the guards and berserkers already set up for the desert to assault the orcs there. We hook up with Calvin and head over there to stop Magus. Now, at this point, I do wonder if Nathaniel's motivation is to figure out what's wrong with him or just to do his duty to his kingdom. Both work, I suppose. Enter the desert. Now, I won't be covering all the encounters in the desert, just a couple of interesting things. In one sentence, the desert will be like this.
The entire Valley of Mines is teeming with orcs. No matter where you're headed, this won't be a picnic.
We have 100 orc fights, talk to the survivors in the desert, and when Nathaniel rests, his sanity really is going down the drain. He has a total personality shift into darkness. He jots down in his journal that he wants to kill Magus, rule the island, and goes full narcissist personality disorder. Yikes. We meet a friendly orc, which is the last tribe amongst his people. He reveals Magus' plans with the orcs. Seems he used them to help him summon the avatar of the god of darkness in the world, but he manipulated them quite insidiously to do so. He killed the orcish scribes, aka the educated amongst them, because they figured out Magus would eventually enslave the orcs to do his bidding. He helps us out, and we manage to breach the temple where Magus is performing his unholy rituals. The temple is short but fun. It's a mix of everything. You got combats and puzzles, an arena, all good stuff. Eventually, we enter a large chamber with a vaulted ceiling and pillars supporting multiple levels. On the bottom level, we encounter the avatar of the God of Darkness, represented by an undead dragon. Sadly, he isn't much of a boss fight, 2 or 3 spells and he's down. The real prize is Magus. We reach the uppermost level of the chamber and there's the bastard standing near a brazier filled with gold. He's expecting us and now we're waiting a bunch of answers. The conversation starts interestingly enough. Nathaniel is in a very fighting mood while Magus just wants to chat. So here's some context. Magus implies that what's happening to Nathaniel is also happening to him, aka his soul is slowly fragmenting, for lack of a better term. But before we get answers, Magus casts a spell on Nathaniel and he falls asleep. Nathaniel wakes up in his own subconscious, and this is a very trippy but cool part of the game. We meet various characters from the game such as Carador, Febra the Assassin, Adrian the Traitor Mage, Grom the Navigator, Calvin the Friend, and most importantly, an illusion of Nathaniel himself. Psychologically, I interpret this sequence as follows. Each of these characters are mirrors, facets of Nathaniel's soul and personality, given the likeliness of the people he's met and the actions he's taken. Each of them give Nathaniel a warning or a reflective sentence to dwell on. Nathaniel is essentially having his soul slowly disintegrate, losing his mind and his identity in the process. The implication is that once this process is finished, Nathaniel either dies or he completely surrenders himself to the forces of evil, or perhaps the void, which from a certain perspective is the same. We encountered the last remnant in the dream, himself, represented as his own conscience. Upon facing his conscience, it attacks Nathaniel. Interestingly enough, there's 2 choices here. If we choose to defeat Nathaniel's conscience or altered version of himself, the dream ends. Nathaniel wakes up and we are locked to face Magus in combat. If, however, we choose to be defeated by the alter ego, we also wake up from the dream, but we get an additional dialogue option to simply spare Magus, aka the peaceful version, rooted in diplomacy and superego. Somebody on the Ahssûn team had a psychology degree. We wake up and finally get some more dialogue out of Magus and some answers. So let's begin. Why did Magus spare Nathaniel? Interestingly enough, that was the suggestion of Adrian the Traitor Mage, who thought Nathaniel could still be of some use. So it wasn't out of altruism. Why did Magus ally himself with Adrian? Apparently Adrian had a grudge against the Chimera Emperor. He was on the run and just found Magus by accident. They recognized each other as being brilliant scholars and used each other for their own ends. Adrian just wanted personal vengeance against the Emperor Chimera. Magus wanted an engineer. Who is Magus working for? Apparently just for himself. The political consequences of his actions don't concern him, but oh boy, there are some consequences. He also delivers a badass line in this regard.
Wo gehobelt wird, fallen Späne.
Where the wood is chopped, splinters must fall. Man, this game has some good quotes despite its faults. So what was this all about, really? It gets convoluted, but the explanation is this way. Long ago, the mages of the world had an apocalyptic battle against the forces of evil in the ancient city of Sarantis. Using this specific book, they managed to banish the avatar of darkness from the world. In doing so, they also banished all divine magic and the gods themselves, so they cannot influence this world anymore. By killing the current weakened avatar of darkness, aka the undead dragon we faced earlier, we severed any ties the book had to the avatar. Okay, interesting, but it still doesn't answer the question. But Magus does state something that I find incredible. He can't even read the book since it's in a language he doesn't comprehend, and the book references places and locations he has never seen. Okay, so you're telling me so many people died for a book that he can't even read? I don't even know how to feel about that except laugh bitterly. That's kind of realistic. In many fantasy stories, Characters end up facing powerful artifacts and they have zero idea how to handle them. But the implication is that Magus somehow is trying to find the lost city of Sarantis and get to another realm. But after this, we exhaust all dialogue options and we're given 2 ways on how to handle this final encounter. If, in the dream, we kill the alter ego of Nathaniel, aka the illusion of himself, we will be locked in combat with Magus and we have to kill him. The boss fight is actually quite good. It has several layers where Magus summons a bunch of copies of himself, constantly flings spells from all of them, also summons undead orcs from the temple to aid him. He also heals up during the fight and teleports around, so it's a pretty fun endurance fight. Once we win, we get the ending cutscene of the temple collapsing after this powerful magical duel. If we instead choose to be defeated by Nathaniel's own illusion in his dream sequence, we get the diplomatic ending, meaning we simply don't fight Magus, and we just leave the temple alongside him. I appreciate being given a choice here, but it somehow is sabotaged by having the ending slides 99% being the same regardless of your choice. Cue the ending. Just casting an AoE spell. Okay. Here we get a cutscene. Did the temple go boom? Okay.
General, ihr seid nun schon seit Stunden hier oben in den Anblick des Meeres versunken.
So schleicht euch doch nicht so an mich heran.
Entschuldigt, aber es war mit Admiral Kronstedt soweit abgesprochen, dass alle lalvanischen Truppen die Insel bis zum nächsten Mond geräumt haben. Er wartete im Übrigen schon auf...
Ich habe es gehört. Und besten Dank. Vor ungefähr einem Mond haben wir noch fast allein die Ork-Armee zerschlagen, die Insel verteidigt und diesen Hafen zurückerobert. Viele Kameraden starben, noch mehr bleiben ihr Leben lang gezeichnet. Als Dank dafür werden wir jetzt von einem Heuchler wie Wulfgar, für den Prinzipien wie Loyalität, Verantwortung und Gerechtigkeit nur dumme Parolen sind, vor die Tür gesetzt.
Nun, die Wahrheit ist, dass beide Seiten sich in diesem Konflikt bewiesen haben und dass das Volk sich ebenfalls für die Unabhängigkeit ausgesprochen hat.
Die Wahrheit? Gerade Wulfgar kann die Wahrheit doch gar nicht vertragen. Wir leben in einer Welt voller Mauern und diese Mauern müssen gerade auf Ahssûn von Männern mit Waffen geschützt werden, um nicht von jenen aus Viranon oder Kemara überrannt zu werden. Die lalvanische Armee hat diese Verantwortung übernommen und Wulfgar ist lediglich unter die Decke jener Freiheit geschlüpft, die ich den Menschen täglich gegeben habe, um dann anschließend die Art anzuzweifeln, wie ich das gemacht habe. Ich hätte es bevorzugt, wenn er sich einfach nur bedankt hätte.
Der Wille zur Macht ist zuweilen stärker als jede Vernunft. Aber dennoch geht das Leben weiter und wir sind mittendrin.
Immerhin kann mir nach dem heutigen Tag die Insel mit ihren Bewohnern gleich sein. Ihr werdet gewiss noch Pläne für die Zukunft der Insel Ahssûn haben. Auch die Stadt und alles darum herum werden sich verändern. Mich bekümmert das nicht mehr. Gehabt euch also wohl, Conservatio. Was wurde im Übrigen eigentlich aus Magos?
Ich spüre, dass ich auf der Insel wieder allein bin. Offenbar ist er von uns gegangen. Aber wenn es im Tempel des Erwachens eine Leiche gibt, bezweifle ich, dass man sie jemals finden wird. TheEternal wird vermutlich auch nicht mehr zurückkehren.
Aha. Interesting.
So, das waren also unsere Legenden von Ahssûn.
He said the thing, he said the name. So that's the game. What a trip. I'm left with more questions than answers, sadly. But overall, here's my general opinion of the game. Individually, almost every element in Ahssûn works, if you separate them from the whole. Individual quests, mechanics, plots, they work. It's a strange situation where the sum of its parts is actually greater than the whole. Combat is great, crafting works well, magic is fun to use, there's a variety of quests to do, the music blends well and creates atmosphere, and there's plenty of items to toy around with. But when you bunch them together, it's like having 50 spices all rolled up into one pizza that makes you question your life choices. This personally led me to believe that there were actual inner conflicts in the development team. One team wanted to go in one direction, another team wanted to go in another. They couldn't reach a compromise and they just said, fuck it, you add your thing, we'll add ours, so nobody's happy. This is especially evident in some quests where you have to backtrack all over the map with one NPC in tow, while in other quests you can just fast travel via dialogue. Why, game? Why force an escort quest where nothing happens on the escort from one point on the map to the other? Then why add fast travel in others? There's also a bunch of other quests where they tend to force you from point A to point B, then back again to point A, and repeat that 3 times. It's exhausting. Story-wise, well, the politics are presented in a non-interactive format. Would have been nice to meet soldiers or spies from Viranon or Kemara so we can put a face to those kingdoms and cultures. But we don't get to do that. What the player cares about is different than what the main character cares about, to an extreme. Let me explain. The player and Nathaniel are aligned at the start. Get better pants, get to the prince, exact justice on the guy who stole our pants. I very rarely care about fantasy politics, mostly because it's presented like a bullet point corporate infographic with no emotion in it. I think the story would have worked way better if, at the start of the introductory cutscene, the spy master told Nathaniel there is evidence of a cult attempting to gain magical power and they're trying to forge an alliance with the orcs or a rival kingdom. Later on, we'd get hints from some crazy NPCs that they have nightmares of apocalyptic battles long forgotten. This would have bridged the gaps in the story and the dissonance between the grounded segment of the story and the epic one. It's also important to note that Ahssûn is not tied to the Gothic canon. It's a standalone story with its own history. I think 2 things prevent Ahssûn from really striking a chord with the player. One of them is Nathaniel, and the other is the tone of the game itself. Nathaniel is properly described as an arrogant courtier, but one would think that being kidnapped and being sent to the slums naked would teach him some humility. There's this sort of unwritten rule in cinema called save the cat. If you want to underscore the moral value of somebody in a crisis scenario, and there's a cat present, the character must always save the cat, or so the rule says. This establishes that the character, despite his flaws, has some innocence and kindness about him and forms a bond with the viewer through feline compassion. This was prevalent in a lot of 80s and 90s action movies. Maybe the German developers didn't follow a lot of cinema, or simply wanted to go the grim dark fantasy route, which this game leans partially on, but by God. Nathaniel is given the choice to poison the cat way too often, and he takes it, regardless of player input, especially in dialogue. And no, it doesn't matter that very late in the game we get a quest to find the lost kitty. The damage is done by then. It's also an optional quest, so you can easily miss it. That's one of my pet peeves throughout this game. The main character is worthy of contempt. As for the tone of the game, it's a tone where it tries to be too many things at once. It tries to be a game filled with political intrigue, but we, as a player, don't really influence the politics of anything. It tries to be a high fantasy game with ancient secrets and powerful magics, but we don't really get any answers or choices in that direction, just consequences. I believe Ahssûn tried to be too many things at once and the efforts were spread too thinly in every direction. I think this is why stories like Lord of the Rings, Andor, or even mods like Arkolos nail what makes a good story. Yes, there are space wizards in Star Wars, actual wizards in Lord of the Rings, and common magic in Arkolos. But all of these stories are grounded and we feel the consequences zoomed in the lives of the characters. When Gandalf falls, we see the tear in Frodo's eyes. When Nemik, one of Cassian's best friends, died, we see the seeds of rebellion being born in his soul. When Marvin leads Vardal, we question whether the expedition was truly a success, considering all the friends he lost. All of these stories are grounded in the human perspective. We are tied to their joy, their dreams, their loss. even if for a brief moment. By contrast, stories where the main character was pulling turnips 5 minutes ago and then is battling the avatar of the god of death don't truly resonate with us. In Ahssun's case, we have two such issues. Nathaniel doesn't resonate with the player, and B, Nathaniel doesn't really form bonds with other people, so he can experience loss and growth, and by extension, we can feel the same as well. Here's a few examples. The port city is attacked, but we aren't affected by it. Nathaniel doesn't have anything to say, he just moves on. The gold mine is attacked, same issue as before. The few characters Nathaniel befriended in the mine are just gone, and he doesn't have anything to say about it. The woodcutters are wiped out, we met them at the beginning of the story, no emotion on Nathaniel's part. The lack of an emotional impact, response, or anything. People live, people die, and Nathaniel has zero reaction to it. Half of the quests themselves are presented in an almost clinical way, which is a crying shame since the story has promise. We had Luffy and Tinuvial and Beren, but a huge chunk of it is presented with such a cold delivery, it's difficult to care about the plot and the characters. Some of the quests are also chock full of emotion, like the crazy hermit asking us to check on his wife and his son's grave. That's a wonderful quest. Or the one where Nathaniel protects some diggers in the gold mine from a racketeering ring. The diggers are grateful and befriend him as a result. Or throughout the game, saving Calvin and having him doing the same for Nathaniel. So clearly somebody on the team really had a heart and wanted to put emotion in the game, but I suppose the rest of the team just went, meh. This game is really cut down the line in the middle for me. Am I nuts? Hey you, people who have played Ahssun, am I overreaching in this analysis? Is it just me? Or did you get a feeling of too much neutral emotion in the game? Feels that the game is avoiding any powerful emotional scenes and everything is so clinical. What do you think? Let me know. So this was Legend of Ahssun. What was the legend exactly? Well, if we go on the forums, one of the developers answers that very question. The legend is the game itself. It started many years ago, a decade in the making. The legend was whether or not the game would come out and be finished. Overall, it's an ambitious mod and I respect that. You can tell there were growing pains while they made this mod. Some design decisions were clearly the result of inexperience or maybe my supposition of inner conflicts. Long before we had Arkelos, we had Legend of Ahssun. And to be frank, I am hoping one day we'll get a sequel to this mod, although I am not holding my breath. There are plenty of unanswered questions. What's Nathaniel's fate? He just disappears with Magus. And what about Magus? What's going on with the other characters? What will happen to Calvin? Is magic going to be brought back to the world, with gods and powerful creatures in tow? Who knows? All in the realm of ifs and buts now. But overall, I'm glad I finished it, but it did leave me with a pretty unsatisfied feeling at the end. I'm not a very big fan of totally vague endings or sequel baits. I know why the writers do that. They hope one day to leave some legroom for sequels or spin-offs, but let's face it, that's never a guarantee, and by the way, you can totally have closure for a story and leave space for a sequel. Basically, Ahssun started with a clear direction, and somewhere I felt it lost its focus, and the developers just wanted to finish it and be done. That was my feeling towards the end. Anyway, if you are curious to play the mod, a couple of words of advice. Don't expect to have all the answers at the end, and if you want to help the old man on the farm keep his house, you have to betray him in order to win his trust. I don't know what's the lesson in that, or if there's anything rational about it. But I suppose what Adrian said in the swamps still applies. Magic doesn't give a shit about what it encounters, and that's what it did to Nathaniel. In any case, thank you friends and adventurers, this was Legend of Ahssun. Stay tuned for the review of New Balance and Golden Gate 2. Stay badass, and as always, remember, the most important story in the world is our own. Till next we meet.